Hello, everyone. I hope you are having a lovely Friday. Um, this is going to be hopefully a short video if I don't talk too much. I just want to give you a little bit of background on al-Farabi's text on the perfect state, and a little background on who al-Farabi is, why the heck we're reading him in the class in world literature. So you can follow along with me and my PowerPoint, and then I'll kind of explain the different tasks that I have available for you. So, okay, let's move to the next slide. This is the text. Al-Farabi is sometimes known as the very first Muslim philosopher. And I kind of mentioned in class on Wednesday, right, that he's really influenced by Plato. I'm going to show you a little bit of geography in a minute. But the Greek Empire sort of stretched into Persia and into what is modern day Iran. And so they were heavily influenced by this Greek philosophy that Plato and later Aristotle would be writing. Um, and just to kind of put maybe his writing in a little bit of uh, context for us, right? We have here, this is our timeline that we've built of all the things we've read so far. We have Plato's Republic, which was written in about 375 BC. And then we have al-Farabi's on the perfect states, um, the other green star here on my timeline was written in about 875 AD. This is almost 1,000 years later. Okay, so there's a big time jump here when we go from Plato's Republic to On the Perfect State. But yet, as we read these texts, they're really saying a lot of really similar things. And I think that's interesting to note that 1,000 years of history has gone by. We're in a different geographical location, but we're still thinking of ideal societies in really similar terms, right? So, of course, we got to do a little geography. Um, I have sort of highlighted here, this is how big the Greek Empire was during the time of Alexander the Great, which is around approximately the same time that Plato was alive. And you can see, hopefully, we've become a little familiar with this area of the world. It's stretching into the Fertile Crescent, right? Where the word empire is written. That's where the Fertile Crescent kind of is, right up there. Even where Alexander, that's Turkey. We have, Syria, and Iraq kind of there. And as it's stretching a little further, we have Iran, and some other countries that I'm not actually probably we keep going. And the empire stretched all the way into until we get to India, which we will later read a text from India, but we haven't gotten there yet. So this is Plato's time, about 300 BC, right? 1,000 years later, the empire did not look like this. Empires always rise and fall, as King George says in Hamilton. Um, and this is something that happens all the time. So again, hopefully you can kind of see on this map. This is the same region of the world, but now the Greek Empire, or what is now known as the Byzantine Empire, has really shrunk down. And it's just Turkey and Greece, all of those sort of islands right there, uh, right to the, like, what is this, the left, maybe the right, depending on how you're looking at the screen. The islands near Turkey, those are all, that's like Greek islands, right? That's modern day Greece. Um, and so instead, we have the rise of some other empires happening. And sometimes this period in this sort of geographical region is known as Persia. And we do at some point get a Persian Empire, but by the time al-Farabi is writing in about 800 AD, we don't really have a Persian Empire anymore. That's risen and fallen within the last 1,000 years. But if we're placing al-Farabi on a map, you may remember an image similar to this, okay? We're looking at a little bit different geographical regions now. I've highlighted here in blue that third region is the Fertile Crescent. So we can see a little bit of overlap now. We've got Greek, the Greek Empire is, stretching right there in Greece and a little bit of Turkey. And then I made it a little smaller so that we can more easily see Persia, right, which includes modern day Iran, which is sort of um, the country that's being overlapped by the Fertile Crescent and Persia. And then I also have noted up here, number 4 is England or the UK. And the next text we read, Thomas More's Utopia, which you'll prepare for Monday, comes from England. So I'm just giving you a little bit of heads up of what's coming next. So al-Farabi, the first Muslim philosopher, the so-called, right, from scholars term him to be, writing in Persia, and he's heavily influenced by Plato's ideas. And we should also note the main language that he's writing in and speaking is Arabic. So I've actually given you a copy. This is a text of On the Perfect State, which in Arabic it's not actually called that. That's just the English translation. But this is what Arabic looks like. And I think I also have a couple, what's my next slide? A couple sort of medieval manuscripts of this is of the Quran, which we have lots of copies of, and this is what Arabic would have looked like probably when al-Farabi was writing. But I just want to point out a couple of details about the actual Arabic title, right? Here I've put it in italics, Ara al-Madina al-Fadila, okay? What's important to know is these terms that I've put in color. So Al-Madina means city, and Al-Fadila means virtuous. And we've heard that word before, right? Plato says that justice is a virtue, right? It's those good things, the best qualities that we seek after. So although our translation is called On the Perfect State, another way to translate the title of al-Farabi's writing might be about the virtuous city, right? Um, this is what is the ideal city? What's the most virtuous, the most good that it could be? And then there's those beautiful Quran pages. Okay, as you read al-Farabi, which, as I've said, it is a difficult text. This is, right, I think part of the difficulty is the translation. This was originally written in Arabic. This is not a language that's similar to English at all, but we have an English translation, and just the translation is sometimes a little convoluted. Okay, so I've written you a document with annotations that you can follow that hopefully gets you to be able to understand, right, some of these key points. Um, I think another thing that makes this text so difficult, right? It's translated, but also it's philosophy. And philosophy is a difficult subject. It doesn't often deal with the concrete, tangible things. It's dealing with really abstract thinking and ideas. And that can sometimes be challenging for us who do live in the physical world and are used to having, thinking about applications and practical things, to sort of spend time, in the hypothetical realm. It can be a little challenging. But I do want you to note that Plato and al-Farabi are really similar. So the key things that we've been talking about with Plato, which I've sort of highlighted here in orange, these kind of main key points, it's the same thing that al-Farabi is saying with just a little bit of difference. And those differences I try to explain in the notes that I've left you. So I think the one key difference, it's not even really a difference because it's also about, this idea that philosophy is one of the greatest virtues we can strive for. Remember, Plato says that the ideal leader of a city should be a philosopher because they have the kinds of skills or knowledge that makes a good leader. And in al-Farabi, he's going to mention a few times this idea of happiness. He says that happiness is what's the word? It's the greatest good. Happiness is the greatest good. It's the main thing that people should strive for. And when he says happiness, right, remember this is translated from Arabic, so there's some layer of words happening here. But when he says happiness, we might think what he's really saying is philosophical enlightenment. Now, why? It's because he's read Plato, and we have read Plato. And you remember from the allegory of the cave, the happiest people, right, are those that escape the cave, that they go out into the sunlight, they see the world for what it really is, right? They understand um, how society really works, right? This is what happiness is. It's gaining that true knowledge. So that's one way that we can maybe understand what al-Farabi is talking about when he says we should pursue happiness. Um, we should talk like that should be the main goal of society is to help people get happiness. And what he means is happiness is linked to knowledge and understanding about the world. It's philosophy. But this is a text, and of course it's open to our interpretation. So I also want you to think, what are some other ways that we might interpret what happiness means? If al-Farabi says the main purpose of a society is to make people happy, then how are we going to define happiness? I think most people would agree that the reason we live in communities, the reason that we're here living our lives, right, on Earth is so that we can be happy, right? People want to pursue that. And in fact, in our own government documents in the US, right, it says that every person should be allowed the pursuit of happiness, right? This is what society and the structures of society allow people to do. What does that mean? To pursue happiness, right? What does that look like? For Plato and al-Farabi, that looks like philosophical enlightenment. But what does it look like for us? And I think that's a question that we, want to ask ourselves and think about, because hopefully in your final project, you are going to be designing your own society, right? You're going to be thinking about, well, we have all these examples of what people think ideal societies might look like. How can you what are the goals of your society? What do we want people to end up with? How do we want to structure things to have to have those goals obtained, right? So for today's, I think that's the end of my slides here. So for today's activity, you're going to do two things. One, there's a short little quiz based off of this material that I've just told you. So hopefully you've taken notes. I was going to remind you to do that, but you should always be taking notes. And also I think the PowerPoint's online, so you can review it as well. And so you take a short little quiz, and then I also want you to create a table, and I've put instructions on Canvas of what this table will look like, thinking about the comparisons between Plato and al-Farabi and how they're thinking about an ideal society. So I've listed out some of kind of the key elements and just kind of go through and either pick out an example or a specific textual quote where you can see like what is it that they're saying about it's the things we've already done on Wednesday: leadership, education, collectivism and individualism, needs versus wants, right? Things like that. I recommend that you do the activity first and then you take the quiz, because one of the quiz questions is going to ask you to use the activity, right, to kind of write a short statement. I will be available on email. I might not be checking it as frequently as I would usually do, but hopefully these instructions are clear, and I will see you guys next Wednesday.